I'm not sure what Toyota's been doing over the past few years, but I'm getting really confused as to what they're shooting for now, because for like the past 20 or 30 years, Toyota was like the #1 in quality. You knew that if you bought a Toyota, you would own something that would practically last forever as long as you just did the routine maintenance. But nowadays it seems like some of the Toyotas that we've always loved have just turned into huge piles of garbage as far as reliability goes. And that's not every single Toyota. A lot of them are still very reliable, but there's a few that have had a lot of issues. And just when I thought things were starting to get better when it comes to like recalls, you know, the Toyota had engine recalls on the Tundra, and a few other vehicles had some random issues with like the new Tacoma coming out. They issued another recall of over 500,000 vehicles. And when a company hardly ever had to do any recalls like 10 years ago, 500,000 is a big number, and even just having 1 or 2 recalls in a year is just massive for Toyota. I saw this article today that said Toyota malfunction in over 590,000 vehicles could increase risk of a crash. So Toyota had to issue a recall of almost 600,000 vehicles for something that's potentially really dangerous. So this goes on a little further that says this could lead to an increased risk of a crash or an increased risk of injury in the event of a crash. And it's something that is kind of silly and simple, but in today's cars, it's actually a very big deal. It says here that the 12.3-inch display on the instrument panel may be blank at startup. And if you're operating a vehicle with a blank gauge cluster, obviously that's going to cause a huge problem. You can't see your speed, you can't see your RPM, you can't see gas, and you can't see any warnings if something is wrong with your vehicle, like no check engine lights or anything like that. And that's one of the problems with a lot of these manufacturers transitioning to all digital gauge clusters. If that gauge cluster goes out and the screen just doesn't turn on, you're pretty much screwed and you have no information in what's going on with your vehicle. And this recall actually affects a ton of new Toyotas. The list is kind of big, so bear with me here, but it's the Venza, Crown, Crown Signia, RAV4, GR Corolla, 4Runner, Camry, Grand Highlander, Tacoma, Highlander, and certain Lexus LS, RX, and TX vehicles. And that's pretty much just about every vehicle they make in the United States. So this recall is a pretty big deal. And of course, if you can't see your gauge cluster while you're driving, this could lead to an increased risk of a crash or injury, depending on what's going on around you in traffic. And that leads me down a deeper rabbit hole into what's been going on with Toyota over the past few years. And when there's safety recalls like that, they pretty much have to sometimes stop the sale of these kind of vehicles. They have to just shut it down for a little bit, stop the sale of any of these vehicles with a recall. If it's not safe, if they're on the lot, they got to pull them back and fix that recall, usually before they sell any of these vehicles. That leads me to like a bigger overall problem with Toyota. And I want to start here with the 4Runner. The 4Runner has been one of the most reliable SUVs that you can buy from any automotive manufacturer. And even when you do something like a slight lift and more aggressive tires, they look really, really good. This is a TRD off-road version. And I will say something about the outgoing model of the 4Runner. It had a pretty much bulletproof 6-cylinder engine, but it was kind of a turd. It was really, really slow, underpowered, and honestly, it got terrible gas mileage. But other than that, that thing would just run forever and you barely had to do any maintenance on it. And then they did what they did with the Toyota Tundra and with the Tacoma, like this little guy here. They took the new 4Runner, and obviously I like the new design. The new design looks really good. This one actually has a little bit of a lift and some 35-inch tires on it, and it kind of looks really aggressive. I don't know if the dealer did this or if someone traded in already had it like this, but it looks pretty aggressive. These wheels are kind of awesome as well. I like the holes in there. But the new 4Runner looks fantastic. I think if you're buying it on looks alone, it's a huge win. However, under the hood here is their 4-cylinder turbo motor, and there's some good things about it and some bad things. For one, the good thing is it has more horsepower, more torque, and gets a little bit better gas mileage. It's not like a huge margin, but it's enough to make a difference in your wallet. However, the kind of scary thing for me on like these new 4Runners or even something like the new Tacoma, and they pretty much share that same 4-cylinder engine, is I'm concerned about the long-term reliability of that turbo motor. You know, especially after the debacle with the Tundra engines, We'll see how reliable these new motors can be and if they're going to have issues. But one big thing is that when you go from a non-turbo engine to a turbo engine, the turbos are usually some of the first things to go. Some of them will last 100,000, 200,000 miles, but others, some will go out at like 50, 60,000 miles. That's actually been happening at Ford. They've had turbos go out at 40, 50, 60,000 miles. That's really not that good. So only time will tell. But if you're wanting a super reliable 4Runner, one of these old school 4Runners is definitely the way to go. And they actually have pretty good resale value. Let me show you something here. This gray one right here, which is more of like a base model, has 150,000 miles on it. And it's still $20,000 they're asking with 150,000 miles. And that's because a lot of people are wanting to buy the old ones because they're so reliable. And if you wanted to get a new one, you're going to spend like $55,000. So at 150,000 miles and 20 grand, people are still going to buy that 4Runner. And just a quick aside, I found one of the new Land Cruisers. It's actually been pretty hard to find these on the lot. They're selling pretty much the moment they hit the lot. They're not hanging around very long. I think Toyota did a good job with the design. I actually like the round headlights over these like more rectangular ones. I think this is definitely more of a modern look. And this one hints back to the old school Land Cruisers that we've always loved. But of course the 80 series had kind of a more square headlight as well. This is more a classic FJ Cruiser kind of thing. And at first a lot of people were pretty negative on this because it didn't have the V8 motor that the outgoing Land Cruiser had. But the problem with that outgoing Land Cruiser with the V8 is they were like $100,000 and sales were just dropping off. So Toyota had to do something different with the new Land Cruiser. And personally, I think they crushed it. I think they did a good job. So far, the motor's been reliable. It's the same turbo 4-cylinder that they're using. And of course, if you wanted a turbo 6-cylinder, you could go grab the Lexus one. But it's definitely something I think is pretty cool. And it's cheaper than the outgoing one, but I think the higher trim levels are still a bit expensive. This one right here is the hybrid, and it's like a higher trim level, and it's $72,000. And honestly, I would probably buy the used one that was the V8, and you can get that for a lot less than that. And speaking of new Toyotas with engine problems, that brings me to the new Tundra. So they had a recall on these new Tundras to where they would replace engines for free, and they even did a stop sale to fix those engines and replace them before they blew or before it was sold to a customer. And the Tundra used to be super reliable, but this new one is not as reliable. It looks really good and the interior is updated, but that recall from the engines on the Tundra really brought down the reliability score that Toyota had overall as a brand, and it also brought down the trust that people had in Toyota to be a super reliable manufacturer that you could just trust to get you through anything and the engine would run forever. And I want to show you something interesting that's kind of along the lines of the 4Runner. You've got some new Tundras here, and then you've got the previous gen right here, the 2017. And this used Tundra Limited with the iForce Max Turbo has 20,000 miles and it's $53,900. But this previous gen Tundra is actually a seriously good deal right now. If you're looking for a Toyota that's going to be reliable and run forever, this one right here, I find this one actually pretty interesting. It's a 2017 with just 29,000 miles, and they're asking $40,995. That's $14,000 less than that new one over here, and it's only 9,000 miles more, and this has the 5.7 liter V8 engine that's going to run forever with very little maintenance. And a lot of people say the interior is kind of outdated on these, but to be honest, it looks pretty good. I think this will be timeless. And it doesn't have a giant oversized screen in the center. Like, I love screens in my car like anyone else, but the screen in the new Toyotas, I mean, it just looks like having a television set on your dashboard. And it's just not as timeless as having something like an integrated screen that's into the dash and doesn't stick over the top. They also have a black one here. I wonder what the price of this one is. Oh, that's interesting. This one is 71,000 miles and 40 grand, and it's a 2020 model. That one over there looks like a steal of a deal with 29,000 miles. That's kind of crazy. Now, just because Toyota has had some, I would say, speed bumps with their transition to these turbo motors, doesn't mean it's going to be a complete and total failure. I think Toyota wants to do everything they can to keep loyal customers, and that's the reason they're doing any kind of recall whenever any little thing pops up or something major like the engines. But I think Toyota will eventually figure out and get through this transition period, and the longer they go with these motors, they'll find all the flaws and fix them. So I do have confidence in Toyota's long-term plan with these engines, but I would love to see a V8 back in the Tundra. I don't know if they're gonna do it because they're not putting V8s in anything else. Like even the Sequoia has the turbo motor, but only time will tell whether it's gonna be a good long-term plan or not. Now, the one big thing that Toyota really has going for it, and that I don't talk about much on my channel, is they are really crushing it with the affordable sports car market. Like this GR Corolla right here. These are fast, fun, little all-wheel drive cars that are honestly pretty affordable when it comes to sports cars. The sports car market is getting in a crazy spot to where everything is just ridiculously expensive. Like you've got the Corvettes at like 80 to all the way up to $200,000. You've got the Mustangs starting at the highest price for a GT that it's ever been in the history of sports cars. You have Nissan struggling to sell the Z, and then Toyota, you know, comes in with some of these sports cars. They got the Supra that was selling well. Unfortunately, this is the last year for the current generation of Supra. And then Toyota comes in with something like the GR Corolla, and they just are crushing it with the sales of these things. And honestly, this car looks pretty good. Those seats look really comfortable. And this is a brand new 2025 model for $45,234. And finding a fast, fun, good handling sports car for under 50 grand is super rare nowadays. But Toyota's got you covered with the GR Corolla. And they also have another sports car that's fast. I wouldn't say fast. I would just say it's fun, affordable, and handles really well in like some twisty roads. And that would be this Toyota GR86. I mean, just look how good that looks. This one actually is a higher trim level with like a ducktail spoiler. And I think that looks really freaking good. It's just the right amount of ducktail, not too crazy. The wheels are good. I like these little flares on the rear that kind of keep dirt from going back too far. Kind of changes the airflow a little bit too. And the price of this one is even less than the GR Corolla. And honestly, this price is so low, I'm pretty speechless. So we've got the GR86 with the 6-speed manual transmission. Would you look at that? And this is a higher trim level right here. And it's only $35,000. The fact that you can get a good, reliable sports car from Toyota for 35 grand, I mean, I can see why they're crushing it in the sports car market right now. And I want to jump back to the Tacoma real quick because I want to show you something I found on this lot. They have probably the most used cars out of any dealership here in the Boise area. And they have already some newer generation Tacomas. And then over here, they've got the previous generation. And I want to show you something I find interesting. This white one here is a 23 model with 20,000 miles for $43,900. And it is a limited. And I want to check how the price compares to like a newer gen that's slightly used. This one right here, this is kind of interesting. This is a 24 model with 20,000 miles, pretty much the same for $44,995. So only $1,000 more for the new one with the same mileage. And this one is a TRD off-road. This one is a TRD Sport. And they also have a 25 model here with 3,000 miles for $40,995. And so what I wanted to show you is how good that these previous generation Tacomas are holding their value. They're selling at the same price as the newer ones that are used on this lot. And some of them are even more than the new generation Tacoma. I mean, it's pretty crazy to see these going for the same dollar amount as the new used ones over here. I think that just goes to show you how big of a fan people are of the previous outgoing generation of these Tacomas with the 6-cylinder engines. Plus, I still think the TRD Pro version of this is one of the best looking mid-sized trucks that you can buy right now. But anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. I just wanted to talk about what's going on with Toyota real quick, that recent recall that's going on, some of the good and bad things on the new vehicles versus some of the used all-motor ones. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe so you get more of these videos. Hit that like button so more people get this information, and I'll see you in the next one.